Welcome to Developing the Leader Within podcast, the podcast that brings you leadership insights from the brightest minds shaping our world. Join us as we dive into conversation with trailblazers, innovators, and change makers, spanning every corner of the globe. Get ready to explore new perspectives, gain actionable insights, and become the leader the world needs today. Unleash your potential. Tune into Developing the Leader Within podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Let's embark on this transformative journey together. Developing the Leader Within podcast, leading beyond limits.
Welcome back, everyone. If you haven't subscribed, please do so right now, as it'll help us get our show to others and help us get to our next milestone. Make sure to catch us streaming on Parade Deck on Roku and Amazon Fire TV on the Purpose Place Network, and catch our exclusive members-only content Going Deeper Within on the Lions Guide Academy. Today, we are speaking with Jordan Marijana Alexander, a good buddy of mine, a fellow ontological coach. Jordan is the co-founder of Adept Leaders and founder of Learning for Living Academy. She is an innovation, inclusion, and leadership consultant and helps organizations harness the diversity of its people to unlock innovation and profitability. Jordan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Enrique. I was so looking forward to having some time together. I'm really looking forward to it.
And so am I, folks. She's all the way in New Zealand, so this is a very international episode right now, and I'm loving it. But we will be speaking about unlocking innovation through diversity, the leadership advantage, and it really is. But before we get into all of that, tell us a little bit about you.
Yes, I'm in New Zealand now, but I was born in Canada. My parents were refugees. One from Ukraine, one from Croatia. They met in Canada, and I must have had that sort of, get into the canoe and paddle forward, because I ended up down here. I started working here about 30 years ago, and the people, the place, the possibilities in this part of the world, which you must come and visit, Enrique. That's an open invitation. There's just so many things that you can do, and so I loved the way that you could have an idea, take it to market, and be wonderful on a global stage, all the way from this tiny little country over here, and they're just full of innovation, and it's just amazing. It's incredible. So I've raised a couple of Kiwi kids here, who now, when I take them back to Canada, they talk funny because they have the Kiwi accent. And I'm really thrilled today to be talking about this stuff, because I feel like, we need to have a deeper understanding of humans and how culture works, and why it's strategic to have diversity for innovation. And I just want to share just one truth here, Enrique. The reality is, because this is all about business too, right? 70% of transformation efforts fail. And we're standing at the edge of a massive fault line in the future of work. The old models are collapsing. We had a bit of a chat about that before we started. There's fear, there's fragmentation. Diversity isn't a nice to have. It's now the absolute most urgent innovation infrastructure we have.
And I believe that wholeheartedly. We did have a chat before this, and the fragmentation is something that, unfortunately, a lot of corporations, they rely on funding from other sources in order to do some things, and contract work and this and that and the other. And depending who you tie to, right, you'll have to kind of fend your lane in terms of diversity. But we've seen a big and huge attack on diversity here in the States. And I hope that that will kind of normalize down the road here, another 3 years, maybe 4 years, depending on the election. But it truly is one of the challenges for most small businesses now trying to figure out, wow, I put a lot of training, a lot of investment, a lot of effort into ensuring that my workforce resembled the people where we live, right? How we operate
Absolutely.
and the people that we serve. So I wanted to ask you right off the bat, how do you define the connection between diversity and innovation in practical business oriented context? Because I know folks are probably wondering the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. It's a great question as well, Enrique, because, I think it's really important that we first distinguish that diversity isn't innovation in itself. So they're two separate but related things. And so when I think of diversity, if diversity is going to thrive, the exact same things that require diversity to thrive is what will have innovation thrive. So things like psychological safety, things like deep listening, system coherence, these are all sort of the, the requirements of the space, the culture, organizational culture that's absolutely essential if diversity is going to thrive and if innovation is going to thrive. So, as a business, if you're thinking about how do I innovate, hey, this is also good for diversity because this is most cultures, most companies, their cultures can't hold those elements of psychological safety, deep listening. So, even where you have diversity efforts on the surface, so you can have like okay, we need two more women on the board, for example. My personal experience in this regard, I was sitting around an old school boys board table, and me and this other woman had been brought on. And when they do the introductions and everything, it's like the pedigree and all of this sort of thing. Our introductions were all about us being women. And I was so pissed off because I've got a PhD. I've done, multi-billion dollar projects. I did a boom, boom, boom on, but it was all about being a woman. And the reason I didn't renew after 3 years was because the culture of the board couldn't hold the diversity. And this is what I really want to impress. The space that we create will allow us to thrive or fail. So I tried to question some old ways of working. So, hey, mate, we're going to go down to the Pacific Islands, we're going to have the conference, et cetera, et cetera. And these decisions were being made outside of the board. And meanwhile, we're supposed to be a governing body. And so I said, hey, look, we can't be doing this because, you know, these are the signs that actually indicate how strong or weak we are as a board. And so it took a lot of wrangling to get this decision overturned because promises were made. So this was the morning, right? So finally, whew, the sweat dripping off my brow. We go and we break for lunch. Guess what happens? We come back. A couple of people have had a word into a couple of other people's ears. There's been phone calls. The decision is overturned. So that psychological safety, that listening, that ability to actually transform is so essential. And most organizations struggle with this.
You bring up a great point about the breeding ground where you're trying to raise something up. If you have a plant, and you have a plant right there behind you that dies because of excess water, you're not going to put it in a mangrove, right? You're not going to co-locate it there because there's nothing but water. And a lot of times when we try to create an initiative like a diverse group, diverse thinking, diverse ways of doing things, if the main players are playing like they used to, then you negate the power of what diversity can do. And you also jeopardize the opportunity to innovate the best way your company is looking for. So a lot of there's a lot of challenges with how that thing happens. So what are some of the most common challenges organizations face when trying to turn diversity into a competitive advantage? And how do you help leaders overcome them?
I would say fear, Enrique, is the absolute number one blocker. And fear kills diversity, fear kills innovation. So think of a gag every time you want to say something, every time you want to speak. So fear is killing all of these potential green shoots, to keep going with your plant analogy. Google and Harvard did this study, and they said that 76% of employees have seen innovation blocked by fear of speaking up. 76. So going back to that diversity, innovation, imagine if 3/4 of your workforce is afraid to speak up.
Mm.
So speak up about anything. So fear is absolutely one of the key elements. And so when you're in fearful mode, you know this stuff, right? You're in survival mode, the nervous system shuts down, prefrontal cortex, creativity engine gone. Is this really a competitive advantage if your people are scared? So that's one of the number one elements that comes into play. The second one that's really, really common is that whole sort of iceberg analogy. You know, what you see on the surface, you've got beautiful laminated value charts, and you've got all the tick boxes of like, yes, we hired 2 more people for that board. Aren't we wonderful? Um, and but it's like HR led, and there's still the eye rolls on Zoom. There's still the comments around the water cooler. So what you're seeing on the tin isn't actually representing what's inside. So that's another common blocker. It looks all good, even to the point where engagement surveys. We're working with a client now. The engagement surveys are amazing, right? Like, we have such committed staff. But then you look at the verbatim comments, and everyone's talking about the executive team member that's a bully. So there's an incongruence. And so we've got these signals, but no one's doing the integration. So what we do is, first of all, we look below the surface within use that X-ray, be willing to go deep, look at where the fear is actually showing up, and where are things fragmented. Companies spend so much money on getting strategies done. And I'm, as a strategic consultant, this is part of my bread and butter. But again, remember the stat that I used, around 70% of transformation efforts fail. So we were working with this one company, and we had a way of saving $1 million per annum with one tweak to how advice was provided to the governance area. Okay, like, not a real big deal. Do you think it got put into place? $1 million a year you could save. So the fragmentation, the fear, that facade that takes place, those things are real, and they're blocking innovation. They're blocking the diverse opinions to be surfaced so that they can actually be employed. So you got to
And
see those in order to be able to deal with them.
yeah, and at $1 million a pop, you'd think that people be jumping on these, transformational changes, or whatever you had to do to implement that. And so fear, definitely one of the biggest things, and we see that on a day to day from the worker's perspective. You know that you've worked in environments that you couldn't just say anything, even if it was the greatest thing that ever was to happen to that company. And so, in your experience, what role does leadership play in creating an inclusive environment that encourages diverse perspectives to flourish and not be dampened?
Leaders are the answer. 100%. The culture is a mirror of your leadership. And the depends on the leader's bravery. It depends on how the leaders see inclusion. It depends on how the leaders see innovation. Are they brave enough to stand up amongst their peers around the table, or do they have a quiet word in the hallway? So how a leader is being in every area, and whether it's around the boardroom table, whether it's in the parking lot picking up rubbish, everyone in the organization is always looking at the leaders. It still amazes me when I have these conversations with leaders that you know, well, those people don't care about, hearing from me. It's like, yeah, they do. So the leaders are absolutely crucial in making all this stuff happen. And it's, how are those leaders being? And so you and I drink from the ontological cup, of course. So what's the language that I'm using? What is it what mood am I leading with? Am I leading from fear, or am I leading from possibility? And how is my body? Like, am I, yeah, I'm really excited about this strategy, and oh, we're going to really change the world. Or am I like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, this is great, and you don't have to be, as animated, but people see that, they see how your body language is. And so every single leader in an organization has that chance to either encourage others to participate and unlock that 3/4 of the people that are fearfully sitting on maybe the next best idea for your business.
Absolutely. You mentioned the checking in of the boxes, right? There are companies that are structured similarly, and they'll say, okay, well, company X did it this way, so let's just do it that way. We'll get a good start. We don't have to recreate the wheel, so let me get that checklist. And so, how can companies move beyond just checking the diversity box and instead build systems that actively drive innovation through inclusion?
Well, I think it's kind of an interesting one, because it requires us to lean into our vulnerabilities. We were taught, certainly at certain generations, I think it's getting better now with the younger ones, Enrique, but there was a place, and this is where you fit, and this is the extent of your role. But really unlocking true diversity and true innovation through inclusion enables, it's like, hey, let's widen this play space. What would it look like if inclusion wasn't just the right thing to do, but became your strategic advantage? Because it is your strategic advantage. And so, if you can put some of these feedback loops in, where you really get what's underneath the surface. You said you're fine, but I can see the tears streaming down your face, or you're really disengaged. I saw the eye roll. Let's talk about it. But people feel quite often really uncomfortable about going there. And even talking about things like workplace culture, um, they almost have the number of chief executives that I feel like I've told them they have an ugly baby. When you come back with the culture diagnostic, it's not personal. Like, these are things that we can't keep pushing under the carpet, because the carpet is, it's just growing. We have to unearth these things. And so I've got a bit of control freakishness in me as well. And so I can see why it's really challenging to let go of that control. But without doing that, you can't share the power. You can't share what might be created if we just open the space up and people feel safe enough to come up with their stupid, what is in their brain is a silly idea or whatever. And then I play off that, you play off that. Oh, hey, my kid was doing this thing on the playground the other, that brings in, oh, in our culture we do that, and having that melting pot of ideas, and what comes from that can be so incredible. And I raise a point. I've been working with the Red Cross to do this leadership training for former refugees in our local community. And this group of young people, sort of from 20 to 40, they're still young in my opinion. They came together, no formal leadership training, and we created that space for them. We're working on the objective of World Refugee Day. So leadership learned in motion so that they can produce something, so it's experiential learning. We've got some, thing. Never underestimate the power of human potential unleashed. This group of people who know, half of them don't have great English. The other half of them had literally arrived in New Zealand a couple of weeks ago. Within 2 weeks, Enrique, they've got the mayor teed up for the event. They've managed to find $5,000. They've got a program with the local youth band. They've got the kapahaka. 2 weeks. So when you create that space and let go of what might happen, look at the possibilities. And leaders have to be able to step back and allow that to happen, participate alongside, and more like when you're bowling and you've got to put the bumper bars up, or maybe that's just when I'm bowling, you just, hey, look, this is the space we're playing in, a little bit out of bounds on this, but then allow that to happen. That's the strategic advantage. That's inclusion in action. That's both diversity and innovation, which gives you that impact.
You just threw me back to a time where I remember a leader saying, Enrique, I need you to lead this effort. And it's this huge Pacific wide, Navy wide almost event. And I said, whoa, I'm humbled. Thank you. Appreciate it. How long I have? He said 3 weeks. And I'm like, this is a Navy wide event. Are you what? But
Yeah.
like you just mentioned, right? I just let a diverse team come together. I told them what the goal was, and they made it happen. They In 3 weeks we had an international event. All forces were participating in Hawaii. We talk about transportation, logistics, housing, food, event planning, resources. I mean, they made it happen. So, yeah, I agree. If you just allow that to just play out as a leader, you'll see some great things happen. And it's because of your people.
I mean, and the other element is, it doesn't even have to be in a proactive way. Like I worked a number of years ago with this manufacturing company, and the New Zealand group was below the line, so multinational. So if you're below the line, you got 1 year to become above the line, or we're cutting you off. And so without having all the pointy heads at the executive sorting out all the solutions, the leaders were sharing, and we did the effort was to involve everyone. We're below the line. Everyone, listen, people could understand that. So we ended up having the whole organization involved in the recovery effort. We had people who before would let paint tint kind of spill out of the jar, who cares, scraping this stuff up and reusing it, because they were part of they were enabled, they were empowered, they knew what was at stake, and they all individually added something that I couldn't have, as a leader, told tint guy to do. I wouldn't even know, but tint is really expensive. And we were in that mode of like recovery. So having that diversity can shine when we create that space.
Now we have obviously a array of leaders. Some are just starting their journey. So, what is one mindset shift and one practical step that they can take away today to start unlocking the potential within their diverse teams?
I think that on the mindset front, it kind of goes back to that letting go of control. Um, and it's kind of like a get out of jail free ticket, really, isn't it? Because it's like, you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to have that intention that you are going to be there, and you're willing to go to the uncomfortableness. So when you were talking about your Pacific event, it's like you stepped into the unknown. You didn't have all the answers. And it's like recognizing that when you let go of control, it doesn't make you a bad leader, it makes you a great leader. And so that mindset, just allowing that diversity to thrive and that innovation to ignite is so important. So that's big mindset stuff. Easy for me to say, mindset shift. Let your people empower you, right? So that's that bit. In terms of action, again, it's really basic, I think. Just learning to listen differently, not trying to fix things, trying to lean into those feelings, trying to learn. Imagine yourself as 5-year-old you. You know, there's no stupid questions. There's no, curiosity rules the show. Somebody said something, rather than take offense to it, be curious. Hey, Enrique, like when you said about the accent, such an interesting comment. Why, what made you say that? Tell me more about that. And so again, just become that active listener. Listen differently. Challenge yourself and learn to feel. We so sometimes let our gut instincts go on the back burner, and it's a core part of our decision making process. So how do you sort of reconnect with that as a leader?
Absolutely. Be human, folks, right? At the base of all that we do, we wake up in the morning and we're just this one random human, 8 point so many billion that they are in the world. Just be that person that, and enjoy what that is. Also, take it to work. A lot of people switch, they got to switch. I got to be this leader, switch, and then that humanity goes away. But I tell you that humanity is probably one of the things that lends us to explore these diversities of all sorts and allow our people to shine the best way that they can. And there's a reason why we hired them for a particular position and job, right? So let them do that, and they will make you look at. Believe me, I know that event in the Pacific, it was all them. They made me look better than what than what I could have been. And so I really, really enjoyed that. Now, I know you coach, you train, you're helping organizations. So, what do you have coming up, and where can the viewer or the listener follow you or support you?
Yeah, thanks, Enrique. Probably at this point, we're just in the process of revamping some of our websites and things. So probably the best place would be via LinkedIn. So Jordan Alexander 01, just drop me a line there. You can also adeptusleaders.com and worthyandwild.com. I think what's coming up is we're because we feel so strongly about the role of culture, and want to help people get access to diagnostics. We're creating a free resource where you can look at the red flags, so you can see what those red flags might be, very simply. So that's coming in soon as well. So that's good. And then we've got some books coming out and some other tools and things that we'll share on LinkedIn.
Outstanding. Well, folks, we're going to have all those links, all those places for you to get those resources as part of the video and show notes, so you can follow Jordan and all that she's doing from the ontological world. This is my sister. We actually went through training together, and I am so elated to have you with me all this time we've been waiting. But, folks, today's episode is sponsored by the Global Trends magazine, the Outlier Project, Fantail Services, Southern Sweet and Sassy Coffee, Ascend Meditations, and Chop AI. And if you've enjoyed this episode and learned something interesting about the topic covered today, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and let us know by leaving a comment. And tune in next week for another episode where we dissect leadership from another angle. And as we like to end the show, success to you.